Who knew cherry tomatoes could trigger a civil emergency? Me. I thought I was teaching kids about photosynthesis, until HOA President Belinda showed up with a cement truck and pointed at my water pipe like it owed her alimony. Me. She thought she was enforcing order, but she didn't know that the pipe had an incredible role in here. When people discovered the truth, the real chase began. This story will blow your mind, me. And I'd love to know where you're watching from. I'm Calvin Brooks, high school biology teacher, tomato lover, and apparently the target of a suburban war I didn't know I'd started. It all began when I planted a small row of organic cherry tomatoes in my backyard, thinking I'd use them to teach my students about plant growth. 5 days later, I got a visit from Belinda Trask, a woman who weaponized blush tones and once fined a man for having a wind chime that sounded too whimsical. She came stomping down my driveway with a tape measure in one hand and a clipboard in the other, me, looking like a crossing guard who failed the TSA exam. She scanned my garden like it had just threatened her HOA throne and said, "Mr. Brooks, this garden violates Article 9.3, me uniform residential plant aesthetics." I stared at her. "They're tomatoes," I said. "Edible, organic, public school approved." She didn't flinch. Just handed me a violation slip like she was issuing a parking ticket to a war criminal. $200 for unauthorized vegetation. I looked at the tomatoes, then at her face, then back at the paper. I half expected to find the words war crime written in red ink next to cherry. Belinda walked off like she'd just saved the HOA from agricultural terrorism, leaving me standing there with a fine, a garden, me in a slow building rage that smelled faintly of basil. That night, I dove into the HOA handbook like it was the final exam for law school for the wrongfully fined. No mention of vegetables, no banned plant list. Me no clause saying, don't grow food unless it's beige. So, like a fool with faith in logic, I called her. She answered like she was waiting on a call from the mayor. Interpretive authority, she said, means we can define standards however necessary to preserve neighborhood harmony. I said, Belinda, it's a tomato, not a rave. She said, rules are rules, Mr. Brooks. Beauty requires sacrifice, apparently mine. 3 days later, the fine jumped to $600 and came with a new threat. Me, failure to comply may result in corrective system adjustments. I didn't know if she meant my garden hose or my spinal column, but it felt ominous either way. My neighbor Gus, me a retired plumber and local HOA trauma survivor, peeked over the fence and said, "Careful. Last guy who crossed her ended up with accidental power fluctuations for 6 months." Me. His toaster used to scream. I laughed. He didn't. That's when I heard it again. The sound of Belinda's heels clicking on my driveway like a countdown to stupidity. And that's when I knew, she wasn't done. Not even close. That was just a seed. What she poured next, that's where the story cracks open. You know what's worse than reading 47 pages of HOA contracts? Me. Not reading them, and waking up to cement in your plumbing. Somewhere between the bylaws on fence height and acceptable mailbox tones, me. I had unknowingly signed away the right to use my own water without first consulting the clipboard queen of suburbia. Because buried deep on page 47, right between the section about approved paver colors and pergola permits, was a clause written in such vague lawyer-scented language that it could mean anything, or in my case, everything. It was called Clause 14.7, and it read like a bad fortune cookie. The association reserves the right to adjust or access shared infrastructure for the safety, order, or harmony of the community. Translation: if Belinda doesn't like your birdbath, she can rewire your backyard sprinkler like it's a hostile takeover. Gus, my neighbor and resident OA historian, nearly dropped his iced tea when I showed him. She used that same clause to shut down a guy's electricity for 2 days because his garden gnome had a Hawaiian shirt, he said. Told him it created visual chaos. I laughed again. That's 2 for 2, and I was starting to realize Gus didn't tell jokes, he told prophecies. So I got smart, or paranoid, or both. I went to the hardware store, bought a security camera kit, and installed it with the same intensity I use when grading senior final exams. If Belinda wanted a secret war, I was going to give her a documentary. And let me tell you, suburban espionage doesn't disappoint. 3 nights later at 11:47 p.m., motion sensors triggered. There she was, on camera, dressed in what I can only describe as tactical yoga attire, creeping toward my utility box with white gloves and a tape measure like she was prepping for a heist. She crouched down like she was inspecting a crime scene, me poking and prodding at my access point with the focus of a bomb tech disarming a tomato. She even pulled out what looked like a small plumbing probe and slipped it into the pipe opening. Not a word. Just the occasional grunt and scribble. She moved like someone who'd done this before, methodical, efficient, quiet. And those gloves. That wasn't about hygiene. That was about not leaving fingerprints, The next morning I rewatched the footage twice before breakfast, then forwarded it to Gus. He replied with 3 words. "She's escalating, son." That was the moment it all clicked. This wasn't just about my tomatoes. It wasn't even about plants anymore. This was about control, and I had just become the resistance. Belinda wasn't protecting community harmony. She was running a HOA surveillance state with bylaws as her constitution and concrete as her enforcement tool. And now I had proof. I used to think contracts were boring, but Clause 14.7. That thing should come with a siren and a biohazard warning. People like Belinda don't read rules. They write them in invisible ink and wait for you to trip. But the camera didn't lie, and the gloves didn't protect her from what was coming. Turns out, concrete doesn't just ruin water lines, it reveals who's really running the show. Stay with me. This is just getting mixed. There's nothing more neighborly than a cement truck parked outside your house before sunrise, unless it's backed by a woman wearing pastel wedges and carrying vengeance. I woke up to the sound of diesel idling down the block like it was preparing for a hostage negotiation. I peeked through the blinds and there it was, a full-size cement mixer humming like a threat with wheels. The driver was sipping gas station coffee, staring at house numbers like he'd been handed a hit list, and sitting on the curb a few feet away, a clipboard, which meant somewhere nearby. Belinda was smirking in a sun visor and plotting something heavy. I had work that day, double, period lab and a pop quiz on chlorophyll. As I backed out of the driveway, the cement truck still sat there like a concrete guardian angel of doom. I told myself it was just a weird coincidence. Maybe someone was getting a new driveway. Maybe someone was building a bunker. Heck, maybe Belinda was finally paving over her own soul. But deep down I knew better. My faucet paranoia was now high enough to qualify as a mental health condition. I spent the whole school day sweating through lectures and checking my phone like my house was on life support. When I came home, I didn't even make it inside before I noticed it. Tire tracks. Fresh, fat. Curving right up to the edge of my utility access point like someone had dropped off a gift no one asked for. I turned on the kitchen sink. Nothing. Just a sad little hiss like my plumbing was trying to whisper goodbye. I ran to the backyard hose, same story. Then I sprinted next door to Gus, who met me with the expression of a man who just smelled bad plumbing and worse politics. He crouched by the utility box, scraped his finger across the lid, and held it up like a murder detective. "That's cement dust, son. Fresh." She did it. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it wasn't. "She wouldn't," I said. "She couldn't." He gave me that plumber stare that says, "I've seen worse from men with fewer clipboards." He walked back to his house, turned on his own faucet, and we both watched as air sputtered out like a coughing ghost. No water. None. That's when we realized, Belinda didn't just sabotage me. She took out half the block. Her vendetta against my tomatoes had somehow mutated into a civil engineering crisis. We stood in silence for a second. The kind of silence where you hear your own property value dropping. Gus rubbed his temples. "She filled the distribution line," he muttered. "This pipe feeds every house on this side of the street. She just committed neighborhood-wide plumbing homicide." My mind was racing, trying to understand how we got from salad ingredients to infrastructure collapse. This wasn't just HOA overreach. This was HOA waterboarding. I looked down the block and saw neighbors watering lawns from bottled jugs and toddlers with sticky popsicles looking betrayed by their own sprinklers. So I ask you, when a clipboard dictator decides you're the enemy, how many faucets have to die before people pay attention? Belinda didn't just cut my tomatoes. She wiped out the entire zip code's hydration. Stay right here, because the backlash is about to boil. If you ever need to fake concern, buy a clipboard, wear beige, and blame the city for everything you destroy. That's exactly what Belinda did. She strutted out like Fama with a French manicure, talking about municipal failure, like she hadn't personally ordered cement to be poured into our water main like it was grout for her ego. The entire street was out of water, and there she was in her favorite top power blouse, holding a concerned citizens folder and lying with the precision of a surgeon. Old infrastructure, she claimed. I've been warning them for months. Which is funny, because the only thing she'd warned me about was unauthorized tomatoes. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was melting. The temperature hit 100 degrees. Kids were crying from heat exhaustion, and grown men were rationing water bottles like they were prepping for a zombie apocalypse. I stayed quiet at first. Part of me didn't want to believe she was actually capable of destroying water access for 47 homes just to prove a point. But then I saw Mrs. Klein, 3 houses down, trying to fill a dog bowl from a bottle cap. Her eyes said what her lips didn't help us. And still, Belinda kept circling the crowd like a sales rep for bottled confusion, nodding sympathetically as she peddled her lies. And let me tell you, those lies worked, at first. Neighbors started repeating her talking points like they were reading cue cards. Aging pipes, outdated systems, city neglect. One guy even thanked her for stepping up. I nearly choked on my irony. I had the footage. I had the proof. I had her on video in latex gloves probing the pipe like she was doing exploratory surgery. But I also had fear. Because if I showed that tape and no one believed me, I'd become the paranoid weirdo who ruined the neighborhood barbecue schedule. Then came the knock, not the HOA kind, the human kind. It was Mrs. Raymond's sweet widow from the corner house, holding her 6-year-old grandson who looked like a sunburnt raisin. Nathan's been crying for water all afternoon, she said. I don't know what else to do. I only have half a bottle left, and I'm saving it for dinner. I looked down at that boy's flushed cheeks and cracked lips, and every ounce of self-protection I had dried up with the faucets. She didn't just kill my garden. She dehydrated a child. That's not community maintenance. That's clipboard terrorism. And in that moment, I finally understood, courage doesn't grow in the backyard, It grows when someone else's kid is hurting and you're the only one with the truth. I wasn't ready to be a hero. But Belinda was about to become the villain of the year. And this time, it wasn't just about tomatoes. It was about truth. Stay tuned, because once this footage plays, no amount of beige is going to save her. Think this story's wild. It's just getting hydrated. There's no sound more beautiful than a crowd watching the downfall of a tyrant, except maybe the gurgle of water returning to a faucet. And that evening, on a street where nothing usually happens except squirrels stealing birdseed, a crowd had gathered with the tension of a live courtroom and the thirst of a desert camel. Everyone was sweating, sunburned, and pissed. There were toddlers with sticky hair, retirees with water jugs, and one guy holding a garden hose like it was a protest sign. In the middle of it all, Belinda Trask, standing there with her clipboard like a paper shield, ready to gaslight 47 households with one smirk. I've been in contact with the city all day, she announced, This was clearly a failure of aging infrastructure. Her voice was pure political theater, smooth, confident, and so full of nonsense you could bag it and sell it as fertilizer. People nodded at first, some even clapped. She had them, until I stepped forward with a Bluetooth speaker in one hand and my phone in the other like I was about to drop a mixtape called Suburban Sabotage Vol. 1. I tapped the screen, If you've got 60 seconds, I said, I'd like to show you what aging infrastructure looks like in night vision with white gloves. And there it was, Belinda, caught on camera, crouched at my utility box in full HOA ninja mode, measuring, probing, scribbling. The audio even caught her muttering, let's make sure this one doesn't sprout back. The crowd went silent. No one moved, You could hear a single ice cube sweating in someone's cup. Then someone in the back gasped, and Gus, God bless Gus, stepped forward like he'd been waiting his whole retired life for this. He unrolled a crinkled city plumbing diagram like it was the Declaration of Independence and pointed to a red-marked junction. That pipe, he said, feeds 47 homes. That footage shows her tampering with it. That's sabotage, not maintenance. Belinda tried to pivot harder than a politician in a scandal. I was simply investigating a safety concern, she yelled. The contractor must have overinterpreted my notes. A woman shouted back, You mean the cement truck you ordered? And just like that, Belinda cracked. Well, I didn't think he'd actually pour it. I told him to seal it off, not drown the whole block. The crowd lost it. People started yelling, someone threw an unopened water bottle on the ground like it was symbolic. A baby cried. An old man pumped his fist. And Belinda, she sweat through her makeup like it was a confession dripping from her pores. Give someone power with no oversight, and they'll weaponize the garden hose. Belinda didn't care about rules, she cared about control. And now the whole street saw her not as the HOA president, but as a beige-clad dictator with a concrete agenda. The crowd was boiling, and Belinda was sweating through her Botox. Belinda said she didn't order cement. Too bad her HOA vendor account showed she signed for 3 barrels and a side of karma. Meanwhile, she was busy blaming infrastructure instability and urban humidity. Gus was busy digging through public records like a caffeine-fueled detective with a personal vendetta against nonsense. He found the smoking gun in the form of a digital invoice, signed, sealed, and ACO-authorized. 3 barrels of industrial concrete, 1 OA purchase order, and the final cherry on top, her name, in all caps, next to the phrase, emergency line containment. We printed it out and marched it straight to the HOA gathering, which now looked less like a neighborhood meeting and more like a poorly catered trial. Belinda was mid-sentence about irrigation safety, when Gus held the paper in the air like it was Moses bringing down OA commandments. Signed by you, he said. 3 barrels. Delivered. Used. On a water line that feeds half the street. She blinked, then glared like she wished clipboards could deflect documents. "That's taken out of context!" she snapped me. The contractor misunderstood my instructions. Apparently, pouring cement into plumbing was just a case of creative overachievement. Enter Derek, the city official. Polo shirt, clipboard of his own, me, and the vibe of a man who's seen worse. But not much worse. He watched the footage with a face carved from granite. Then he looked at the invoice. Then he looked at Belinda, me. "This isn't a maintenance error," he said flatly. "This is deliberate sabotage of a municipal utility system." The crowd went silent again, me. Like the air itself didn't want to interrupt the moment someone finally called Belinda's bluff. "There will be criminal charges filed," he added. And just like that, the HOA meeting upgraded to a pre-arraignment. Belinda began to unravel like a poorly knit sweater in a washing machine. "I didn't mean for it to affect everyone," she shrieked. "I just wanted to send a message!" Which, as it turns out, is not a legal defense. Derek wasn't moved. You contracted a vendor. You signed off. You obstructed city infrastructure during a heat emergency. That's not a message. That's a felony. Somewhere in the back, a neighbor started slow clapping. It was beautiful, and that's when it hit me. Give someone a clipboard and no checks and balances, me. And they'll pave over your rights with the confidence of a backhoe. Power without oversight doesn't build communities. It bulldozes them. Clipboard power fades fast when real law walks in, me. Belinda thought she was running a homeowner's empire. But now she was a soon-to-be mugshot in a cardigan. And just like that, Belinda went from suburban queen to state defendant. Me. Turns out sabotaging water during a heat wave gets you a bracelet. The kind with numbers and a guard. Belinda walked into court with her hair blown out and her attitude intact, still clinging to the idea that weaponized concrete was just a misunderstood landscaping enhancement. But the judge wasn't buying it. Neither was the jury. And neither was the 6-year-old in the front row sipping bottled water like he was testifying silently with every gulp. When the sentence dropped, it hit harder than a dropped bag of quick, set cement. 6 months in county jail, $60,000 in restitution, 200 hours of community service, and a lifetime ban from HOA leadership anywhere in the state. She blinked like someone had just read her the price of her own downfall. "But I was protecting the community," she wailed. "From tomatoes," the judge replied, without even raising her eyebrows. They took her out in cuffs. She didn't get to keep the clipboard. Somewhere in the back, Gus muttered, "Should have planted squash." Less drama. Belinda's house was auctioned off within a month, me. The HOA bylaws were shredded like old credit card bills, and we started fresh. First vote. A brand new rule: no cement may be poured into or around community utility infrastructure. Ever. We called it the Belinda Clause. Gus was voted HOA president in a landslide. He didn't even campaign. He just stood up and said, "No one's getting fined for vegetables on my watch." And that was that. He ran the next meeting with a mug that said Water Warrior, and we unanimously agreed to eliminate clipboard inspections unless absolutely necessary, or comedic. We didn't just fix the pipes, we fixed the system. Every major decision now requires a public vote. Every utility adjustment has to be posted in writing and approved by the board and the residents. Turns out, nothing scrubs corruption out of a charter quite like the smell of cement in a plumbing system. What used to be HOA law felt like a dictatorship in loafers. Now, it feels like democracy with a gardening glow, And the best part, people actually come to meetings now, for more than just complaints and cookies. Because if this mess taught us anything, it's this: when you give one person unchecked authority, you don't get order, you get wet concrete in your water main. But when neighbors rewrite the rules together, you get tomatoes and trust. Belinda's garden grew lawsuits, ours, tomatoes, and irony. It tastes sweet when you harvest it with your neighbors, not behind their backs. Want the full harvest? There's one more twist to pull the water main she tried to destroy. We put a plaque on it. Community 1. Belinda, ballpoint. Right there on the edge of my yard, next to the same pipe she tried to entomb like a pharaoh's curse, now stands a shiny bronze plate that says, "Or water. Our rights." Neighbors pass it on walks. Kids touch it like it's part of a museum exhibit. And I water the tomatoes growing 10 feet from it. Extra slow, just to be petty. It's not just plumbing anymore, It's a monument to the day a clipboard got dethroned by a garden hose. My backyard has turned into something I never expected: a community classroom. Every Thursday, I've got third graders learning about root systems and sun exposure like it's the cutest science rebellion you've ever seen. Gus brings popsicles. Parents bring chairs, The same space that almost got me fined into oblivion is now where kids laugh, learn, and occasionally mistake a cucumber for a lizard. Nobody complains. Nobody cites bylaws. Nobody wears gloves at midnight, We grow things now on purpose. When new neighbors moved in, they looked nervous at first. You could tell they'd had a bad run-in with a previous HOA. The kind that measured grass height with a ruler and wore shame like perfume. But here, we greeted them with a basket of cherry tomatoes and a laminated map of the neighborhood water lines just in case. No cement, no surprises, the welcome card said. They cried. We laughed. And just like that, trust took root again. Turns out tomatoes fix more than pasta, they fix people. And as for Belinda, she vanished like an overripe peach at a farmer's market. Rumor says she's now managing a storage unit HOA in Nevada, where the biggest scandal is someone painting their lock lavender. But here's the real kicker. The concrete contractor who poured the cement, he flipped, gave a full statement, then reinvented himself as a motivational speaker for municipal ethics. He's now touring local city councils with a PowerPoint titled, What Not to Pour into a Water Line. I nearly choked on my coffee when I saw the flyer. The truth is, the best fertilizer for a community isn't soil. It's the downfall of a tyrant who mistook power for purpose. We didn't just survive the HOA war. We rewrote the rules, regrew the roots, and rebuilt something better. And if there's one thing we learned when neighbors stick together, no amount of concrete can block the flow of truth. So if you've ever been told to sit down and comply, plant something. If someone abuses power, turn on the spotlight, And if someone tries to pour cement into your life, hand them a watering can and tell them, not today. This story wasn't just about Belinda's downfall. It was about standing up, for rights, for truth, for each other. So if it made you laugh, think, or maybe look twice at your HOA documents, leave a comment and let me know. Hit that like button if you believe communities should be led by people, not ruled by petty dictators and loafers. And subscribe if you're ready for more wild, true-style stories that uncover justice where you'd least expect it. Got your own HOA horror story, Drop it in the comments, let's laugh at the madness together, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Because tomorrow we have another incredible story.